This weird area. We like to throw around the word if someone's qualified. In the DEI conversation. Well, what is qualified to you is not the same thing as qualified to me. Sometimes qualification isn't about which school you went to. Sometimes it's about your competency. Do you fit into this environment? Are you nice? Like these aren't things that you put on a resume, right? These are things that you would find out in some sort of interview. Do you fit into the work corporate culture of this particular environment? So when it comes to finding good people who fit a particular job, like that, it's all subjective. It's highly subjective. Do I believe that in certain circumstances that someone coming from another country is coming here and fulfilling a job that could have had a better person fill it who's an American? Maybe, but once again, that's all subjective. Maybe someone does. Maybe in a let's use programmers. Maybe there's a strong demand for AI programmers, and there's a whole ton of them in India, but there's not as many in the United States. And then you start hiring Indian workers. Now, if you have a quarter of your workforce is Indian, or maybe half of your workforce is Indian, wouldn't you want to hire more people who kind of fit into that workforce culture? Like, it's not, to me, it doesn't seem like a stretch that they want to continue to go down that path. And that's when you have certain tech firms that look the way they do, and they have a lot of people who are foreign born. So it really just depends. I think the biggest problem is that within this culture war, everything becomes a nail, and they're running around with a hammer, right? There is usefulness. I've known multiple people who've come here, and they tend to be in, like where I live at. There's a lot of Indian people who live over here. Many of them have come here on H1B visas. Nicest people I could deal with, and they're very smart, and they're hardworking, and they make a lot of money. And so, do I know if there's for certain that there's someone who applied for the same job who can do something? But I don't know. Like, I think people presume that there definitely is, while at the same time, we'll talk about how our kids are not being properly educated. Our kids are dumber. They go to colleges and they're becoming woke, and they're getting these BS degrees. So which one is it? Do we just have this, massive pool of highly educated kids who can't get a job, or are they not being educated, or is it somewhere in between? But I think a lot of Americans have this old ideal that they're not putting the math equation together. There clearly is an issue in our education system. We could look at all the world rankings as far as math, literacy, and all that stuff. The United States is not in the top 5 for most of these categories. There is a competency issue. There's an education issue. There's an education gap. And so if you're telling me that, man, there's just a ton of kids out there who are ready to rock and roll as programmers, who know how to do math without whipping out a calculator, like, like it's just, I'm not sure 100%. So if I'm an employer, I think I would put it like this. I trust more of the private sector than I do the public sector. And I think that the private sector is often going to go for something that is not just the cheapest labor, which a lot of people think that it's all about cheapest labor. Because if you hire the wrong person, it becomes expensive. And if you hire too cheap of labor, it becomes really expensive. So they're going to hire the cheapest competent labor workforce that they can in tech fields. And so if they're finding a lot of success hiring certain types of people coming from other countries like India, then that's what they're going to continue to do. And I mean, I can only speak anecdotally. I haven't met a dumb Indian person who came from another country that I worked alongside. They were all relatively smart. They could do the job. If there was any sort of weakness on their part, it might have been socially, but that's because they're not from America. So like, it's a learning curve. Just like if I was to go to another country, socially, I might struggle too. So, it just really depends.
Now,
yeah.
When this whole conversation started, it drew my mind to this idea of meritocracy. right?
Hmm.
The idea that America is a meritocracy, and this sort of just pokes some hole in that idea, or that it's the best man for the job that always gets the job. That's the narrative that has always been put out there. America is a meritocracy. So if you're not getting the job, maybe you're not smart enough, you're not working hard enough. So work harder, be smarter, or
Hmm.
it's an IQ thing. Now, MAGA is finding out that when you talk about criteria for employing someone, it's not as straightforward as just being the best in the job. There's so many other factors that come into play.
Right.
There are so many other factors. You mentioned something about employing the least expensive, competent option, and that's always been my idea. My idea is that, you know what, the best person for the job literally doesn't always get the job, but
Right.
someone who is competent enough to do the job usually gets the job. So if you see someone like, say, Kamala Harris, for example, and Donald Trump or any other Republican candidate, oh, they're so well. She's not the absolute best. She's not the best that the Democrats could have found. But ask yourself the question: is she competent enough to do the job? That's basically what most businesses do. No business is going to be sitting around waiting for the most competent person, because that's a something you can't actually find. So this just
Right.
puts a hole in that whole argument. Meritocracy isn't really the best. It's about finding who is someone who is competent enough at a price that the company can afford to pay. And that's what we're seeing now.